Welcome to the Hidden Gifts of Loss podcast. Today, my guest is Josea Crossley, and she is the founder of the Dark Woods of Grief. For over 20 years, she's been working with grief and trauma through practices that work with the nervous system and rewiring the brain, learned through her studies in somatic therapy, attachment theory, deep nature connection, craniosacral therapy, shamanic study, Tibetan Buddhism, and yoga. She learned to support people to completely transform how they experience the world and themselves. And this entire body of work was a hidden gift of a very traumatic childhood. And this is now her gift to the world. And it's her mission to create spaces where people can experience safety and belonging and gain enough skills to be able to heal. And she says the body does the rest. So I'm so honored to have you here today, Josiah. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. Yeah.
So I know you have a lot to teach us about walking through grief, and I have to say that I really like the name, The Dark Woods of Grief. It really describes the visceral feeling that we have when we're going through it. So
Mhm.
I know you offer a lot of different resources and trainings for people going through grief or wanting to work with people in grief.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, the dark woods of grief, it really comes from I think it's a great metaphor, but it also comes from my background in deep nature connection and primitive skills work, survival skills. And with the deep nature connection also comes, when we bring someone who has been disconnected from nature and themselves and each other, when they start to get reconnected to that, there's a wave of grief that comes in recognizing all the ways that we've been disconnected. But also love the metaphor of the dark woods because it's true also with survival in the wilderness is you don't want to we always say never go into the dark woods alone. I mean, unless you're on like Alone, the TV show, right? It's like generally we don't go out into the wilderness by ourselves, or maybe we're doing a vision quest or something like that. Yes, there's scenarios where you do, but it's not a way that we live. Our chances of survival and thriving are much better when we're in community, when we have other people to share the experience with and to resource off of our different skills. And it's also really true with grieving is that we're not designed to be alone. And
Mm-mm.
almost every earth-based indigenous culture had community grieving cultural practices and ceremonies, rituals to bring themselves through grief and trauma. And on a regular basis, it wasn't just something that you do like once a year. It would be like a very regular practice, of course, as needed if there was a major loss, but also just the recognition that there's always stuff happening that our nervous systems need to process together. And so these practices were just super integral to village life. And that's something we've really lost, as you know, in Western
Yeah,
culture.
we
Yeah.
definitely have. Grief can just be such an isolating experience, too. We're just
Yeah.
not encouraged to even express it, really.
Well, there's such a stigma around it. There's such a stigma around, you know, loss of control, basically, right? And when we're grieving deeply, we are in the, it's the wilds of grief. We don't have control. We could burst into tears at any moment. It's like there is this loss of control that happens. And there's so much stigma around that in our society due to our culture, our societal history of colonization, basically, where
Hmm.
it has been at different times, really dangerous to be in our authenticity and in our emotion and to look hysterical. What was very dangerous at certain
Hmm.
times. And even though we don't necessarily cognitively remember that history, our bodies remember it. And so it's very real.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And the colonization has definitely separated us rather than drawn us more into community, the way that we live in our houses, separate from other people. And we don't even really have rituals. Like we have funerals, but that's what, a couple of hours, you know? Grief
Mm-hmm.
can go on for a very long time, as
Yeah,
you
well,
know, you
it's a
know?
lifetime process when we have a real serious major loss. I see it as an initiation, and we start off often in like deep suffering with
Mhm.
it. And as we learn to develop a relationship with our grief, that changes from suffering to more like being with the emotions as they arise, and they always arise and then pass.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That, the 2-hour funeral where, a lot of times at funerals, you're expected to not express any emotion. Like so
Not,
many
yeah.
families, it's like you shouldn't cry. You shouldn't actually express emotion.
Right. And if you're the family, usually you're the ones that are hosting that after party, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
When my mom passed, we couldn't have a funeral because it was COVID. But
Yeah.
in many ways, I felt like, I mean, I didn't have the closure, but I also felt like relieved that I didn't have to throw a party right
Mm,
afterwards,
I agree.
because that's a
Yeah.
lot of pressure on people. I don't,
Well, yeah, you shouldn't have
yeah,
to do anything at that point. It should be the community coming around and doing
yeah.
everything for you, really.
Exactly. I was thinking about this the other day too. Whenever people talk about a loss and they start crying, so often they'll say, I'm sorry, and they'll
Uh-huh.
immediately try to hide it.
Yeah.
So, how do you work with people to make it safe and encourage them to let
Mhm.
those emotions flow? I mean, I think that's so important for your own healing.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned COVID because I mean, you asked me to talk about our programs, and COVID was really a brutal thing to have run through our society in so many ways. But there's also certain, I call them the blessings of COVID.
Yeah.
Like the
Yeah.
things that came out of it that were unexpected, that were like positive, right? And one of the
Right.
things which I didn't expect was we had to move all of our programs online. But previously, we were in person locally in the community I was living in at the time, and because of COVID, we had to move everything online. And I was kind of like, oh, it's probably not going to really be great, but it's better than nothing. And
Mhm.
when we moved everything online, it like totally blew my mind at how deep we could still go together in that venue. And it became really amazing because we started to have people joining from all over the world. And I think that the space that we've created is really unique. Like there's not many spaces like it in the world. And so for people to be able to access us from wherever they are, where there might not be something like this, I think is really, really sweet, a real
Yeah.
blessing.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure. There's not many things out there like it.
Yeah, a lot of grief support is connected to the churches often, which is wonderful, but not everybody, resonates. And also, there's not necessarily in a more conventional grief support space, there's not necessarily this view of it as an initiation and as a place that can actually, like COVID, of course, it's not something we would ever wish to go through, but there's blessings that, the hidden gifts that come from
Yes,
it.
yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
so we really hold that, not with an expectation that people see it right away. We're not like, all right, let's get right to that silver lining.
Exactly. No.
That when you're in the suffering, you're just like need space to be in the
Yeah.
suffering. But you asked specifically like what process do we bring people through? I mean, I think that one of the biggest things is just for people being able to come into a community and have a totally abnormal experience in terms of like how their grief is welcomed. And I say
Mm.
abnormal because it's just not the norm in our society, but we just welcome. It's just like come as you are, and cry, laugh, like whatever weirdness you need to express. It's all good.
Yeah.
Like we get it. And like
Yeah.
everybody that's in that space gets it because they've gone through something. There's all different types of grief that people are working with in our space, but everybody's gone through something. Everybody's there because they want to work with it in a way that is going to benefit themselves and the future generations, uh,
Yeah.
rather than leaving that burden on the future generations.
Yeah.
Right.
And seeing
Yeah.
it as initiation just completely reframes the experience.
Yeah.
I kind of see it as like this portal that you have to go through. It's kind of like birth, going through that birth canal. It's not comfortable. It's a lot of work, but then look what happens when you
Yeah.
get through it. Not
Yeah.
that grief is something to rush through, but it's going to change you no matter what.
100%. Exactly. Yeah, it's going to change you. And it's probably going to ultimately, if you can allow it to work on you, it's going to make you a better person ultimately. Because the reality is, in our human experience, is like everyone is going to experience loss. And, it's like we're all going to die.
We're all going to die.
We
Exactly.
are, all of us, every single one of us, and all the people that we love are eventually. And if we're lucky, maybe we go quicker than the people we love.
I know, right?
But also it's just the reality that we're going to experience suffering, we're going to experience loss, we're going to have to go through that grief. And once we've been through the initiation of it, we're so much more available for the fullness of life.
Yeah,
Really.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just have
Yeah.
a perspective that you really couldn't have had
Yeah.
before. You just can't really know it until you've been through it. I used to think of it as like the death club. It's like I didn't want to join. I didn't want to go
Yeah.
through this initiation, but wow, like nothing makes you appreciate life so much,
Yeah.
really, as loss. Even the things that you realize you're so grateful for, and that things can just change in an
Mhm.
instant. So I know that I don't take things for granted anymore, you know?
Mhm. Exactly. We become so much more present to what is here right now in front of us.
Yeah,
Mhm.
definitely. So I love everything you're doing. I just really resonate with it. And it's just such a beautiful gift to people. And it must be so rewarding to see somebody come in and then go through a transformation. And there's so many different kinds of loss. And to,
Mhm.
to be given the tools, because it's like you need a roadmap. Like, how do I
Mhm.
do this? And
Mhm.
and you're providing that. And that's just
Mhm.
priceless. That's
Mhm.
just
Yeah, I think
amazing.
one of the most profound, I mean, there's so many profound things that I've gotten to bear witness to. And I often feel like, and I often say to the groups, it's like, I'm actually learning. I'm the student here. You're teaching me because, there's particularly the parents who come in who've lost children.
Yeah.
Like
Mm.
there's one fellow who's been with us for almost 2 years now. And it's been so incredible to both be able to support him, but also to witness the, like, I call it crazy wisdom that comes
Mhm.
out of somebody who's in that. He's like, I'm keeping my heart open, I'm feeling it all. And it's so fucking painful, but to be there with it. And it's like, there's so much wisdom, there's so much love that comes out of that place.
Yeah.
It's really profound. It's like really direct contact with God in a way, if you're, whatever you want to call
Yeah. Yeah.
that love, or it's really that the big L, like
Yeah.
of love. It's like that direct contact because I think we can't, I don't want to say we can't survive because I think we can stay alive and we can contract and shut down when we have these kind of experiences, but we can't really like live
Yeah.
through these experiences
Mhm.
without, getting in contact with that big L love
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
staying in contact with it like pretty regularly because there's just no other way to do
There's no
it.
way but through. I know.
There's no way but through.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
You're
Yeah.
really in this liminal space. You're really between two worlds. And I
Mm.
think ritual is a really great way to kind of anchor yourself,
Yeah.
and ground through it. Ugh, can't
Yeah.
imagine losing a
Yeah,
child.
exactly. Uh-huh.
Ah,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I mean, it's profound what happens in our Zoom grief group spaces, but you mentioned the ritual space, and the ritual space is, it's a space where when we only do ritual, like big ritual. I mean, we do lots of small little rituals in
mhm.
the online group, but when we come together in person at the retreats or in the trainings, and we move into the ritual energy where and I know a lot of people, there is also a lot of stigma around the word ritual, especially if people have like grown up in the Catholic Church or whatever, like
Exactly.
ooh,
Yeah.
ritual,
Uh-huh.
or like satanic ritual, we think of when we hear the
Right.
ritual. But really like a ritual, it's like all it is we're setting intention and we're moving through a process that involves some physical movement, usually some physical objects that, like you said, help us to anchor and ground
Mhm.
the the experience that we're having, both to really express and feel and be with the experience of grief that we're having, and then also to start to anchor in our commitment to life. And in that space, when we invoke this ritual energy, it's like it opens up, it is like you said, opening up a portal again. And the ritual energy, the group ritual energy, is something that can meet like uh, pain, especially when it's traumatic grief or trauma or just direct trauma. It's like that as an energy, it's like a big energy, right? It's a big energy, which is why it overwhelms us and often shuts down our nervous systems in the first place. And so in order for it to move through our systems fully, it needs to be met there needs to be a big energy to meet it, right? And the
Yeah.
ritual energy is something that can really do that, where it's like, okay, this is a big space. You can get big here. You can really express that. It can move through, and then we make so much space in our nervous systems for what's next, for life, creativity, and Yeah.
Sure. And like you're creating this big container that can hold it. It feels so big, but when you have that sacred space that can hold all those big emotions, and you really can experience it and just
Hmm.
like let it go. It's interesting too, because when we think of grief, I think a lot of times we just think of death, but you mentioned traumatic grief. I mean, there's grief that can come from so many different things, like your story coming out of the loss of childhood, basically. And I think just even acknowledging that this is grief, you're grieving something is really helpful. Just a
Hmm.
reframing, because we don't think of it that way. So, like,
Yeah.
what do you do with it then?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, one thing that I say is that not all grief contains trauma, right? Sometimes there's
Right.
a loss where it's like what I call clean grief, where it's like, someone dies in old age. And of course, we still feel it is still a major loss and we still grieve that, but it's different than, say something like losing a child, or I know people who lost their parents like you during COVID, where they couldn't actually see them, so they were isolated, and like there's a layer of trauma to that. Or like you said, like the loss of childhood, or it's like imagine losing your mother, but when you're a baby,
Oh.
there sometimes, other times she's not, it's like
Mhm.
that's
Mm.
a loss that creates so much dysregulation in the nervous system. And that's a really traumatic grief. And so with all trauma, as we heal, the grief is a part of the healing. We have to let the grief flow of what we didn't get, what we expected and didn't receive, as Frances Weller puts it, with our childhood trauma, and also the loss of the village that we don't have. It's like we don't even know what we've lost at this point in our society. We don't even remember what we've lost,
Mm.
culturally as Western people, and the losses that are happening in the world collectively, the humanitarian crisis, the war, genocide, like the loss of freedom that people I think are really feeling right now in the West.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
There's so many layers and I think when we can start to recognize what we're experiencing as grief,
Yeah.
it's so helpful because as soon as we can name it and recognize it, then it's like, oh, okay. Especially if we have built some skills towards grieving, then it's like, okay, I know what to do with it. And we stop stigmatizing ourselves too. We stop like making ourselves wrong for,
Right.
exhausted, feeling depressed, feeling dysregulated. We can then be like, oh, this is grief moving through me, and that needs support and it needs attention, it needs care. Um, and then it can move through, right? So.
Yeah. And just creating that awareness is so important. There is so much, I think, collective grief happening right now with everything. I mean, I was pretty shaken by the results that have recently happened. And that wasn't necessarily recognized as grief. I have a Facebook group and I put something in there about, I know we're all feeling a lot of grief right now, and you don't always know necessarily who's in your Facebook group, even if it's
Yeah.
private. And somebody made a comment like, what grief? Should be a
Mhm.
time of celebration.
Well, and some people thought, I mean, I don't want to get too into that, but
I know.
people,
Yeah,
some people who voted for he who maybe we shan't name right now because he's getting named
exactly.
too much in my opinion.
We call
But
it
voted for
Voldemort.
him. Oh, my friend saw an interview with this man who had voted for him, and then his wife got deported, like because she was, yeah. So it's like a lot of people who thought they were celebrating or thought maybe things were going to be like, okay, maybe this isn't such a terrible thing, are now, I think, like,
Yeah.
holy heck, this is not going how we
Yeah.
thought it would. So I think it's kind of like we're in a storm, it's wavy. We're in the storm. It's like the storm has been coming,
Yeah.
but it's here now. We're in it. And I don't want to sound like I'm like spiritually overriding the situation, because I'm not. And I am every day. For the last year and a half, I've been bearing witness intentionally to what's happening in Gaza and in the Congo. And like,
Wow.
it's heavy and it's hard and it's not an experience that I wish to be having, but I also feel a responsibility towards like feeling it and supporting the collective to transmuting it. But I also think that it's like we can't transmute something, we can't heal something until we see it. And I think we are having an opportunity right now collectively to really see like, and one of the dangers actually that I see is that there's a lot of projection going on to Trump as like he's the problem,
Hmm.
whereas the problem is not him. I mean, I'm not saying he's helping.
Right.
But the problem isn't, it's not him, it's the whole system, the whole system that's
System.
built on white supremacy and on male supremacy, that
Yeah.
system was built a long time ago. And, I just was down a rabbit hole about colonization in Ireland a couple of days ago, and like the Protestant church was very much responsible for that. And Protestant religion is the main religion in America. It's yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's like these people who were, that really believed that the colonization that they were doing was a positive thing are now have come here. And I've had actually people come to my grief groups who grew up in like evangelical Protestant upbringing. And they're like, that's a part, they're grieving that, right?
Yeah.
That bringing of like the narrow
Yeah.
way of seeing things. And I think this generation, or, we're multi-generations now of those of us who have our eyes more open to what's happening. And so we have an incredible opportunity. And I've been talking so much about politics lately that I think a lot of people are like, but wait, what about the like grief from death or what about that kind of loss? Are you still working with that? And I'm like, yeah, it's like the two are, it's not separate.
Not
It's not
separate.
separate. Because these grief rituals that we lost, and my people were Irish, and so to go back to the colonization of Ireland, it's like those rituals weren't just lost, they were literally outlawed.
Yeah.
They were
Systematically
systematically
dismantled.
outlawed.
Yeah.
Yeah, systematically dismantled and outlawed. And the repercussions of that are so far reaching.
Yeah.
It's generational. We're experiencing the repercussions of that in so many places right now. We're experiencing repercussions from the Holocaust right now in Israel, Palestine, with this
Yeah.
warped idea that somehow killing another whole people will create safety for it. It's like it's absolutely warped, and it comes back to, it's like we have to look not only to our own personal grief, although, but that is the start. That is absolutely the start. So it's not, I'm not saying don't look at your personal grief, only look at the world,
Mhm.
because that is the place where we have to start. Is okay, how do I deal with me?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
Like, how do I deal with me? How do I get myself to a place of having a healthy relationship with grief? And
Yeah.
then it's like we have to look behind us to ancestors and the ancestors that behind us who didn't get an opportunity to grieve, and to recognize that like a part of what we're feeling as we're going through our very personal experience of loss is all the losses, not only from our own lives, but of the many generations behind us, that there was no grief support, there was no grief ritual. You couldn't express
Mm-mm.
emotion publicly, or you risked, being burned at the stake or being excommunicated, and so it's like that's where we're at now. That's the level. And I know not everybody's ready to hear this, but for the ones who are, it's like that is the level of what we're dealing with
It
right
is.
now. And that is how incredibly important it is that we tend to our own grief and get support to tend to our own grief, step into communal spaces where we can be tended to, so that, because it's not just for us personally, right? It's for all beings everywhere when we do this work.
Exactly. Because, in this environment, we find ourselves feeling angry. And like, what do we do with that? And it's like, I'm
Yeah.
not normally somebody who has a lot of anger. And so it's like, well, this is incongruous with who I want to be and how I want to show up in the world. And so almost felt like irresponsible, kind of taking a break from all that information. But I also felt like I was just so much overload that I was just getting really burned out, So I was like, let's focus on, well, back to what you said, like, let me focus on being like the best version of me that I can be right now, and being a light for other people, and not letting all of that negativity suck me into that vortex, because it's just rampant right now.
100%. Yeah, exactly. It's so rampant, and it's such a balance. It's like walking on a razor's edge of balance, because it's not about turning away and disconnecting ourselves from what's happening in the world. And we do need to create a sacred space for ourselves so that we can actually metabolize what's happening, because it is an overload. It's absolutely, our nervous systems are not designed to be taking in this level of information. It's only in the last, not even, it's less than like 30 years that we've had access to social media and like the internet and news from all over the world. bombarding
Yeah.
us from every channel. And so there's a blessing in it, in that we can be more globally aware, but we also have to be so aware of the danger in that, because ultimately it's not one political leader or the other, or this person or this country or that nation that's the problem. It's an energy of that is moving through things that can take any of us at any time. And we have to be so careful, because we can so easily get swept up in that energy, and then we're feeding the problem.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think what you're doing of, yeah, like it's not an ignoring or a disconnecting, but it's a recognizing of like, this has to come first, because this is the only place, that we can really take
Yeah.
responsibility and make deep change. And it's proven that when there's a critical mass of people meditating, for example, in a neighborhood, that it actually will change, like crime goes down, violence goes down.
Mm.
And so if you think about that on the global level, like if there's really, I think, a critical mass. I mean, of course, studies have not been done yet. We're in the study right now.
Yeah. On this scale. Yeah.
Like, what will happen if we can reach a critical mass of those of us who are saying, yeah, I get it. Like, it's me doing my work first and staying centered and being loving and tuning into like, what am I here for today?
Mhm.
Yeah.
More than ever. It's like important that we do that, which is maybe going to help move in if we kind of step back and look at what could potentially the hidden gift of this whole storm be. It could be that people are coming together more, more grassroots, more
Yeah.
community. I think it's really important. I forget who I was listening to, but she was saying it's so important to have not only the communities that we have online, which I think are really, really important. I know I'm getting a lot out of various communities, that I'm in, but even your close neighbors and stuff. Like if
So, yeah.
when shit goes down, if you need somebody to help you out, it's good to know. And I live on a cul-de-sac, and I only really know two of my neighbors.
Right.
you know
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, I've been here for 33 years. A lot of
Uh-huh.
people have come and gone. A lot of people I can tell just kind of by when we have interacted that these are not people I would hang out with. But really, I know
Mm-hmm.
two of them, and that's on a
Yeah.
cul-de-sac, right? So we're
Mm-hmm.
so isolated. So,
Mm-hmm.
we need some deliberate ways of creating community globally and locally.
Totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And I think it's also like finding what we do have in common with people, which is what we would do if we were like actually stuck with just our neighbors.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like we would find things in common. We probably also get on each other's nerves, but we would mostly be finding things in common.
Yeah.
Like I have friends whose parents are politically really divergent from where they are. And so they go out when they visit, they go out in the garden and they look at what's growing and, and see.
Agree to disagree, right?
Yeah, agree to disagree. And one of my business teachers, actually, he was talking about in his company how himself and one of his main like high up employees who works with him, they discovered that they were voting differently in the election.
Mm.
And and he had this conversation with this person, and basically they got down and they were like, let's look at all our values and like what we think we want for the world. And when they did that, they actually discovered that they were almost 100% in alignment.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. They just had two different ideas of what was going to get them there, right? And so I think we have more in common with people than we think.
Mhm.
And I think we're very much a part of that energy that I was talking about that's running through things, that's, wreaking havoc, is that energy is constantly separating us, making us think,
Yeah.
oh, that person is, or othering people, right? That person's
Mhm.
bad, that person's wrong, this person believes that, therefore I can't even talk to them. And
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, but where is our common humanity, right?
Mhm.
Where are our common values? And that is one of the most incredible things with grief work is, like you said, you don't know who's in your grief circle because you're grieving together, right?
Yeah.
Everybody experiences suffering. Everybody goes through grief and loss. And this is why it's such a powerful decolonial tool to bring us together, is because you can't hate somebody when you've been in grief ritual or in grief circle with them, because you've seen each other's hearts.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Uh,
tell us about what you're offering coming up.
yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, well, we have a bunch of programs and trainings open right now. Our Darkwoods Grief Support Group just opened for enrollment. So that's our online grief support group. We meet on Zoom a couple times a month. And anyways, lots of details that I won't get into, but I think it's a really wonderful space for grievers to come into. And then we have 2 trainings starting in the next couple weeks. And we have our 2025 grief tending and ritual facilitation training, which is a 9-month training. And we have 3 retreats. So it's an opportunity to really dive deep into the ritual aspect of grief work in the retreat spaces. And it's a space to not only learn the work, but it's an interesting space because we're simultaneously learning, but you're also, it really is, I think, an initiatory process of being in these deep spaces together in our authentic grief, because we learn this work by being in it, by doing it. So we actually move through ritual together in all of the retreats. And then we have 16 modules online. They're 3-hour calls throughout the 9 months. And it also involves some private one-on-one mentoring with me. And then we have another training. This is the first year that we've offered this, and we're actually shifting the whole, everything's in flux right now, just like the world.
Just like the world, yeah.
Yeah. So we're offering a level 1 training this year, which is all online. It's 10 modules online only that will work in the 2 cohorts will be moving together in the online classes, but there's no in-person retreats required, which I think is making it a lot more accessible for people who are far away and don't necessarily have the finances or time to be able to travel to the west coast of BC for the retreats. And so that is also starting in the next couple of weeks as well. And yeah, so
Oh, that's so exciting. And we can find it at darkwoodsofgrief.com.
darkwoodsofgrief.com. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. I hope to do one of your next year.
Wonderful.
It just really resonates, and it's really great spending time with you. And I definitely
Okay.
hope to do more.
Fantastic. Yeah, I really look forward to being able to connect with you more in that way as well.
Yeah, awesome. You have any parting words?
I think just, there's so much energy moving collectively right now, and just to be really tender with yourselves out there, especially if you're going through your own major loss, personal grief experience. But, even if you're just doing like regular old humaning, regular old being, like
Yeah.
there's a lot happening, and just bringing in compassion for yourself and recognizing that as you move the emotional energy through you, it's also for the collective,
Mhm.
and all moving collective energy as well, so it's not, don't take it personally. Don't take your feelings too personally. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank
I
you.